It is my pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Bradley Glenn Jacoby. A graduate of Auburn Montgomery in 1980, with a Bachelor of Science in Biology, Dr. Jacoby further matriculated at Vanderbilt Medical School, where he received the Jonah Reed Medical Scholarship. Dr. Jacoby did his residency training at the University of South Carolina and completed a cornea and external disease fellowship at Wake Forest University. Dr. Jacoby operates a successful solo practice in Covington, Georgia, where he currently resides with his wife, Ann, and their 5 children. You will be pleased to know that Dr. Jacoby provides a $5,000 annual scholarship based on financial need to the School of Sciences. In addition, Dr. Jacoby is honored as one of our top 40 at 40. However, we have not asked Dr. Jacoby to speak about any of that. We have asked him to speak today because in addition to his professional accomplishments, his life story is compelling. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Wall-Hawk welcome to Dr. Bradley Glenn Jacoby.
President Gouge, Chancellor Veras, distinguished faculty, and honored graduates. I would be negligent if I started my speech today with anything other than my heartfelt congratulations to each and every one of you for your accomplishments. It is a high honor for me to be here with my family on this special day for you. I wish that I could say that I was here because I walked on the moon, I cured cancer, or led our nation's troops in battle, but that would not be true. I do not have a long family history of people who've graduated from Auburn University. In fact, I myself am an accidental graduate of AUM. I enrolled here in 1976 for one reason, and that was to avoid humiliation. I would like to return today in part to say thank you to the university that helped save my life. That life started as the proud son of Barbara Jacoby of Snowden, Alabama, a widow at age 26 with 3 small children. I'm honored to have my sister here with me today. She was the youngest of us at 3 and a half. I was 2. Our brother Dale was 6 months old when our father died. We lived our lives in our early years as the working poor. That's a nice way of saying you live at a low level, you can pay your bills most of the time, but not all the time. The devastating economy of the 1970s, combined with the death of our younger brother Dale, made our family situation a whole lot worse. We became the working very poor. That means you can't pay your bills any of the time. I learned at a young age that the only essential household utility was running water. The loss of telephone service at our house meant a lot of embarrassment for me and Diane when our high school friends would call. They would often call me and say, you need to call the phone company and tell them that there's been some kind of mistake. They say your service has been disconnected. The loss of gas service in our house was even worse. It meant we had no way to dry our clothes, no hot water, and worst of all, no heat. I learned the psychological value of what it meant to have a home. When you pull up to your house in January at 9 o'clock at night and it's 34 degrees outside, and you realize it's also 34 degrees inside, it doesn't make you feel any better. Diane and I would often secure ourselves in the smallest room in the house and heat it with a small space heater. She would sleep on the bed under all the covers we had. I would sleep on the floor in my coat. I had the better deal because I was closer to the heater. We would often pass a hairdryer between us for additional heat. We fought really with everything we had to keep our electricity from being disconnected because it was our last protection against the cold. And I thanked God on a daily basis for our electric oven because I needed it. You know, I'd wash my school clothes, lay them out on the grill of the oven to dry. Since ovens aren't really designed for drying clothes, they would often be sort of burned on one side and wet on the other, and frequently I would have to actually wear them to high school wet. Really, this is very hard for me because I had to watch my sister who, despite our situation, was valedictorian of Lanier's 1974 class. Thank you. I had to watch her turn down a full academic scholarship to Duke University because we did not have the gas money to get to and from North Carolina. After several years of living that way, I really seriously began to wonder if there would ever be a light at the end of our family's tunnel. That light flickered a little bit later in 1974. Diane didn't get to go to Duke, but she did what all smart people in Montgomery did that year. She went to this new school called AUM. The significance of that was totally lost on me at first, but a couple years later, after I graduated from Lanier, it became more obvious to me. I had a job working as a busboy at Red Lobster on the Southern Bypass. I had no dreams. My life's goal at that time was that when my friends went off to college, I would be promoted from busboy to waiter. The idea that I would be able to get to go to college myself was impossible. Fortunately, my mother had higher goals for me than that, and she secured a basic educational opportunity grant, $338. That would cover the $175 tuition and leave some money for books. Somehow, the thought of commuting to this new school didn't seem like college to me. But the thought of hearing my friends tell their college stories while I was still bussing tables at Red Lobster was too much to bear. I thought to myself, with the average intelligence of an 18-year-old, at least I could tell my friends that I was going to AUM. I could even pretend like it's what I really wanted to do. I enrolled here to avoid humiliation. I knew I had to have a job in college because you cannot eat school books. And I was very pleased when I got here to find out that AUM makes that possible. I was able to go to class from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 2 days a week if necessary, and have entire days off to work. That was a tremendous help to me. Also did a little bit of schoolwork while I was here. And I found out one thing right off the bat. AUM is not easy. And I'm going to say this, and I mean it. I'm going to say this, and this is the absolute truth. Since I've left this place, I've been to a lot of schools, some of them pretty proud of themselves. And I can tell you the instruction I received here is as good as any of those schools and better than most. That is the truth. When I enrolled in medical school at Vanderbilt, I found that I had no problem competing with students who had come from Harvard and Stanford and universities all across this country with the education that I received here. There's no doubt that my personal American dream started in this place with a solid education from AUM. As you get older, though, you'll realize that dreams do not occur alone. There are lots of people that helped me along the way, and in some areas you wouldn't expect. Too many to name, but 3 that I will. My manager at Red Lobster was one. You see, I never really got that job promotion to waiter. When everybody went off to college, it was very easy to find new employees who wanted to be waiters, but no one wanted to be a busboy. So I got to keep that job. Out of frustration, on a busy Saturday night when they really needed me, I called in sick when I wasn't sick and went to a Lanier football game instead. The next morning, my manager fired me. The experience was so distasteful and embarrassing for me, I did not miss another scheduled day of work for 34 years. Another person who, in retrospect, let me say it this way. In retrospect, Dr. John Teggins, my pre-med advisor and physics teacher at AUM, would now qualify for a dream maker. Hard for me to say, but very true. When I got to AUM, let's just say my grades as a freshman were not good. Dr. Teggins and I started our relationship with a basic incompatibility problem. He was an academician who had high standards. I was a teenage boy who had none. His class was a simple class. His tests were 5 questions. They were complex physics, mathematical questions. All you had to do was pick which 4 you wanted to work and skip whichever one you wanted. an 80 average would get you an A. Despite that, A's were hard to come by, and by the grace of God Almighty, I had one. This was going to be my first academic triumph at AUM. I took my final exam, turned in my test without designating the problem to skip, and walked out into the hallway. Instantly, I realized my mistake, went back in and told Dr. Teggins. He informed me that when that happens, he simply grades the first 4 problems of the test and skips number 5. I informed him that in this instance, he needed to make a special exception for me, because if he would just pick up my test booklet and look, he would see that I had left problem number 3 completely blank and worked number 5 instead. His hands really didn't make any movement in the direction of my booklet, and thinking that he had possibly been overcome by some type of temporary paralysis, I opened it for him. No amount of pleading would work for me, and 2 weeks later, when I looked at the C on my transcript that could have been an A, I told myself I would never make that mistake again, and I did not. That painful but necessary lesson paid off big for me. After that, my grades at AUM became near perfect for the last 3 years of my time here. And 2 years later, when I was applying to medical school, several schools specifically told me that they were willing to ignore my poor freshman year because of my good years after that. For me, gaining admission to medical school was a very important part of my American dream. Finally, a person who I will never forget is Dr. Anthony Drake, a man who employed me in his veterinary clinic for 3 years in college. You see, in the summer of 1980, I had graduated from AUM, but I had still not gained acceptance to Vanderbilt, my dream school. I could not get it out of my head that that is where I needed to be. But classes started there in 3 days, and it did not look good for me at all. So defeated, I moved to Mobile, Alabama to prepare to attend South Alabama Medical School, a very fine institution, but not where my heart was. I was there for 2 days when my apartment manager came over and said my mother had called and wanted me to call her back. This nice lady offered to lock me in the apartment office, a room the size of roughly a broom closet, while she went to lunch and let me use her phone, their phone, to make long-distance phone calls. I called my mother and she said, no problem. Vanderbilt called, they wanted me there, classes started tomorrow. From the time my name showed up on anyone's list in Nashville, they had allotted 1 hour to get a final answer from me. Because my mother had no home phone, they called Dr. Drake, who'd written me a letter of recommendation. He called my mother at her work, she called my apartment complex. By then, 50 minutes of my precious hour had passed. I now had 10 minutes to call Vanderbilt with the final answer, or they would move on to the next candidate. I hung up the phone and, alone in a small office, thought about my predicament. I was a broke 22-year-old. I had just used my last disposable income to move to Mobile. I was not sure I had enough gas money to get back to Montgomery, much less go on to Nashville, and I knew my family could not help me. It hurt my heart to sit there and think that I was going to have to let whoever the next candidate was live my dream, because for me, the obstacles were just too high. With those thoughts in my head, the phone rang, and my first thought was, I need to answer this. These nice people have let me use this office. It might be somebody wanting to rent an apartment. But it was not. It was Dr. Drake. It was as though mental telepathic brain waves had left my head and gone up I-65 to his Montgomery office, and those brain waves were telling him that this young man was about to make a very big mistake. Dr. Drake told me that under no circumstances was I to turn this opportunity down. He said, I will lend you whatever you need to get started. You can pay me back whenever you can. Next to the day that my wife told me she would marry me, those are the sweetest words I have ever heard. Thank you. I called Vanderbilt, told them I would be there the next morning, and I was. That singular gesture changed my life in more ways than I can put into one speech. You are sitting in the place right now where my American dream started 32 years ago. Yours starts today. All of you have traveled that difficult road of opportunity to get here. Some of you traveled it on a red carpet, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of you traveled it through a minefield, and there's nothing wrong with that. The coping skills you've had to learn to get where you are now will serve you in ways you may not understand for decades. It does not matter how you got here, it only matters that you are here now. I can tell you that when I left this place, I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would be here today speaking with you. So I do it only as a representative of the many people in this audience and in your class who have similar stories but just are not telling them on this stage. So with the perspective of an old guy who's seen both sides of the track, I'd like to give you just a little quick advice. In just a few minutes, you are going to get a degree that is going to entitle you to call yourself college graduate. When that happens, I want you to think like one and act like one. I want you to be fabulous at what you do. Not good, not very good, not excellent. I want you to be fabulous. AUM has given you the tools to be able to do that. If you will simply set higher standards for yourself than the people around you set for you, if you will work every job you do, no matter what it is, like you own the company, you cannot fail. Second thing is, I would like you as a group to serve as motivators for others. You guys have it down. You're here about to get the brass ring. A lot of people in the world have abilities, but for whatever reasons in their life, it hasn't materialized into something like what you're doing today. What you'll find when you get out in the workplace is a lot of people have the ability, but they don't have the nerve to better themselves. You have the nerve or you wouldn't be here. You need to help guide and motivate those people. I always like positive reinforcement, but by God, if you have to fire some 18-year-old who calls in sick when he's not really sick, do it. It'll teach them the value of work. If you're a teacher in any capacity, I would say of anyone middle school age or above, and you have a student you think is not crossing the T's and dotting the I's but has the ability, don't fix their mistakes for them. Some jobs you get to do it right the first or second time, and some jobs you have to do it right the first time every time. You have no idea what kind of job that kid's going to have in the future, so don't lower your standards. And finally, I would like to say to you that all of you are going to prosper in your lives. It's just ingrained in who you are. You'll find that prosperity takes different forms with different people. Enjoy whatever form prosperity takes in your life. But if, in that life, you're ever fortunate enough to combine your own hard work with your God-given gifts to help someone else on their path to success, they will never forget you. So graduates of 2012, once again, you all have my heartfelt congratulations. I would like to say that the opportunity to speak with you here today in this place is the biggest honor of my life. Now let's pass out some diplomas. Thank you.